Florida Gators are national champions. They took down Houston 65-63. And whenever you watch Houston basketball, if you are a fan of points, of offense, of the Alabama Nate Oates style of shooting threes, 110 to 105 kind of games, Houston's not your jam. And that was kind of on full display last night. It was physical. It was defensive forward. But if you were able to stay up for the entirety of that game, because I don't know how many people really truly were, but if you were able to stay up for the entirety of that game, you saw that kind of Cinderella ending that you were talking about, Ice. You saw an ending. That's how we want the national championship to end. That's how you want to, at least if you're a Florida fan, if you're a Houston fan, that's absolutely devastating. That's how you want to hoist a trophy at the end of the day. Walter Clayton Jr. follows up a massive offensive performance against Auburn, 34 points, with kind of a quiet day, at least on the box score. But Walter Clayton Jr. fits. He is the savior. He is the king of Florida basketball. It was the Walter Clayton Jr. show, at least in the second half.
Yeah, but not until the second half. And this is where the game got really interesting, particularly down the stretch, because, I'm sitting next to Marcus Morris. I hope you guys watched a bunch of our content on Yahoo that we were all putting out. And Marcus kept saying early on, here's the key. You cannot press, because Walter Clayton Jr. was irrelevant in the first half. Yeah, he was dishing it out. I get he had some assists, but he wasn't even getting opportunities to take good shots. He had literally no points. Only the third time all year that he had a half where he had 0 points, right? So you're talking about a guy that, and Marcus kept saying it, one of these guys is going to feel the moment and they're going to press too much. And what did you see? Walter Clayton Jr. didn't really get those opportunities until there was about 8 minutes left in the game. And then he got hot enough, and then he was really starting to take over. At the same time, LJ Cryer on the other side started to press a little bit, was starting to look too hard for his shot, and Houston didn't feel like they had any other options. I have to give Walter Clayton Jr. so much credit, because he let the game come to him. And when you're not having the game you've had in the rest of the tournament, I cannot imagine in that moment with 60,000 people screaming at you how difficult that is.
Yeah. Well, he started the game taking very bad shots. I thought his first 5 or 6 shots that he took were ill-advised. I was like, hey, the score is only 2-3. It's not 68-67 with a second left, and you have to shoot the shot, Walter. Let the game come to you. But I'm more impressed with his facilitating, because anytime that you have a teammate who's dropped 30 points in the Elite Eight, 34 points in the national semifinal game, you're expecting them to put up big numbers. And so when you don't see him do that, how is your offense still flowing? Well, he was still connecting to his guys. He was still finding off the pick and roll, his rollers getting down low, knocking down shots. So I was impressed with the 7 assists that he had that were very much needed in order for Florida to win. It's so interesting, going into this game, it was Florida's offense versus Houston's defense. And the main question that I had was hey, is Houston going to be able to slow down Walter Clayton Jr.? If they can slow him down, they have a chance to win a national championship. And this was my pick for the national championship. When Selection Sunday came out, we did our brackets. It was always, for me, Florida versus Houston. I felt like Florida's defense in the last 10 minutes of that game was the most impressive thing we have seen from that team the entire tournament. Not that Houston is this amazing scoring team, but it was the fact that they were in control of that game down the stretch. It was the fact that Houston was the aggressor for 30 minutes of that game. I was talking at halftime to Wally Zerbiak, and I'm like, Wally, Florida's getting punked out here. Houston is coming out, and they're just punking them on the boards. They're making sure that they're the aggressor. I feel like that last 10 minutes for Florida, they had to get stops in a row. They had to clean up on the boards, and then they had to get high percentage looks offensively. But really, to me, it was their defense that won them that game. And then Houston, 4 turnovers in the last minute of the game, not getting a shot up at the end. My heart went out to Emmanuel Sharp, because he catches the ball at the end, Caroline, and he goes to shoot it. And Walter Clayton Jr. is there, an amazing, fantastic closeout that not many people really highlighted, but he closed out fantastic. And Sharp, shoots the ball and then drops it right away. And he's trying to block everyone out so that way his teammates can get the ball. And unfortunately, it worked against him because he really let the time off the clock. Technically, Fitz, if you ask, he either should have shot the ball and just got it blocked, shot the ball and go into the defender and you try to draw the foul. But at least after you throw the ball up and you're boxing everyone out, you got to realize at a certain point, our time is going down. Like, let me just pick the ball up and it's a turnover. And then at least we can foul. They have to make free throws and we can extend the game. So it was a very anticlimactic finish from that standpoint. But again, Florida's defense, we had talked about their offense all season long. In the end, it was their defense.
By the way, Marcus Morris was sitting there screaming repeatedly, touch the ball, because we all knew we needed the clock to stop. But I also want to stress, too, Florida, like Coach Golden flat out said at the press conference the day before, when we were all at breakouts and they were talking to everybody, when he was asked the key to the game, he said, every single rebound we get in this game is a win. We have to win. And the only way we'll do that is if we get those rebounds. It was close, but they out-rebounded Houston by 1. That, to me, is that's the biggest shocker of the game. That's the biggest story of the game, because if you control second possessions out of that, if you manage to do that against Houston, you can't beat them. Like, I don't want to sleep on the fact, as ugly as the ending was, let's remember, Houston was up by 12 in this game. And there were people sitting there saying, man, a 12-point deficit to Houston is like a 24-point deficit to everybody else. Their defense is suffocating. Well, on this particular night, Florida stayed calm. They controlled the boards. I mean, that changes everything. So it was wild to watch a team in Houston that just a couple of days ago managed to stay calm and rise. And then in this game, they did the exact opposite. Like, it's wild that a 48-hour switch can make such a difference to how they approached the last 3 minutes of the game.
It felt like Florida did to Houston what Houston did to Duke. And maybe not in the same exact form and fashion, but it felt the same. That you have a commanding and comfortable lead, and especially a lead like that, like you alluded to, Fitz. Houston does such a good job of wearing opponents down, of just making it so difficult, specifically in the second half, that if you can keep it close in the first, that is no guarantee that you can keep it close in the second. Because Houston's physicality and their conditioning, they just continue wearing you down. We saw it on full display with Duke. When Duke's backs were against the wall, when they needed to just make a play here and a play there, they couldn't. Their lack of being on that stage, I felt like really shined through. Look at Florida. Look at the grind that they went through in the regular season of an SEC schedule, their non-conference schedule, and then look at Florida's path so far in the tournament. Florida was like, oh, our backs are against the wall. Oh, we absolutely need to just some sort of spark offensively. No problem. We can stay calm because we've been here before. We've been through this before. I thought going into this game, the two keys to victory for Florida were out shooting Houston, which they did not, and Walter Clayton having a huge day, which he did not. I think Florida just kind of went back to maybe what's made them so impressive all season long, and it's their depth, the fact that every single player that touched the ball had at least a point, that Walter Clayton Jr. didn't need to be Superman, that it was Alex Condon stepping up, that it was Will Richards stepping up, and that they all kind of were spreading the love around a little bit. And it was their defense, like you said, even though it's just one more rebound than Houston had, that's really all you really needed with a team like Florida that can score like they can score.
There is one more element, though, that we haven't talked about, and I'm not saying that this was a problem. I want to say I think it was done balanced, but the change in officiating from the first half to the second half was a massive part of this game. And in the first half, I mean, I was two rows off the court, and they were shoving each other to the ground in the first half, and the refs were letting it go. And immediately, and where I give them credit is they were letting it go on both ends of the court. So I'm looking at it and I'm saying, okay, as long as the officials are consistent, I don't care how they call it. In the second half, when they came out and it became so clear, and this is one thing that Ice can speak to, I didn't know until last night, because I'm sitting next to, four former NBA guys and 2 analysts. And the minute there were a bunch of calls on Florida right away, the first thing that all the guys kept saying is the refs are going to even this out. So when the technical foul happened and everybody was sitting there screaming, one thing that Marcus said, the guys kept talking about, was the coaches are getting their players together right now on Florida, and they're saying, hey, just lob it in. Because right now, there's such a differentiation on who the fouls are being called on. It will even out. Force the refs to make these decisions. They did that, right? Like the calls evened out. What we saw, a slew of calls on Florida early, and then it balanced. And once this game was being called particularly tight in the second half, again, consistently on both ends, so I don't fault the refs. But it just felt like Houston didn't have an adjustment. And then they got frustrated, and their body language showed it. Like they got in their own feels because they didn't like the way the game was being called. Everybody started to get super emotional. I don't think Houston was ready for that second half change. And that's just one of the variables that Florida did a better job in the game of handling. Ice.
I mean, first of all, you shouldn't have to adjust. Let me start there. Like, we're in the national championship game. It shouldn't be a tale of two cities, a tale of two halves of the fouls that were called in the first half, the fouls that were called in the second. You were right. They were letting those guys play. There were several plays where we're watching this game as a group with CBS, and we're like, bro, that's a foul. They're not calling it. Okay, awesome. We're going to have a great basketball game. Houston, guys, was in the bonus for 17 minutes in the second half. Like, Florida had 17 fouls with 17 minutes left. How do you not win that basketball game? Every other 30 seconds, Houston should have been on the free throw line. And instead, it's Florida who makes 15 out of 19 free throws in the second half alone to win the basketball game. I mean, those guys did a great job of being on attack mode and just capitalizing on the moment, like Fitz said. I was disappointed with the officiating because you just want it to be consistent. And that's a hard thing to challenge a team to adjust to mid-game. And if you're a ref and you go back and you look at the foul count, you're like, oh, okay, we got to even this up. Bro, it's going to lend towards the team that you're evening it up for towards the end of the game. So I also think that was a tough aspect of this game. But all in all said and done, what a job like Todd Golden did. We were talking last night on CBS about, if this championship solidifies him as one of the elite coaches now that exists. And fortunately for him, there are tons of elite coaches that we call elite that have only won one championship or that haven't won a championship yet. And so because he's got one, I feel like he has solidified himself as someone, and getting a national championship under 40 years old. Like, I mean, this man is going to be hungry. The last time Florida won a championship, they went back to back the next year in 06, 07. That's a tough, tall task to say that they're going to have to do. But I think it could be cool if it happens. I think it could be cool if that's the storyline moving forward.
And moving forward, I know the Florida athletic department, the Florida fan base as a whole, they're passionate. And it's the kind of fan base that if you build it, they will come. That Florida softball is a perennial contender. That sport has a lot of support. That, it doesn't matter what it is, beach volleyball, cross country. If you are a national championship contender, you're going to get that kind of support from the fan base, and you're going to get that kind of buy-in from the athletic department. It's just it's a school, it's a program that's thirsty for success. Florida basketball has been striving to get back to those 06, 07 years ever since then. And it's only gotten more and more difficult now that you're competing in an incredibly deep conference. It's only gotten more difficult in this new era of college sports. So now that Florida has a basketball national championship, not that there wasn't investment beforehand, because I don't think that you can win a national championship without investment all the way around, especially in this era of college sports. But now that they have a championship under their belt, I think it's going to be full speed ahead. And that's a program with a whole lot of boosters with incredibly deep pockets. And from, kind of the retrospective, kind of looking back and reflecting on this team, we talk about this Florida program. They've got all the money. They've got all the investment. It's Florida basketball. It's a rich history. Well, Todd Golden came from San Francisco, and Walter Clayton Jr. came from Iona, and Will Richard came from Belmont. Like, this is a team whose background is largely mid-majors, kind of humble beginnings. And I love that storyline with this Florida team. Like, yes, it's the big bad Florida Gators, but it's this team that felt like an island of misfit toys that came together to be such a perfect combination.
That, Caroline, is the exact. So I came away with this theory over the course of the weekend, because you start talking to these players and we say Cinderellas are dead. Here's my theory. Cinderellas aren't dead. Cinderellas now are not about teams. They're about individuals. Like, so instead of looking for a mid-major team that's going to come up and shock the world. Look at the stories we saw over the course of the Final Four. Look at the players that we met over the course of the Final Four that maybe we knew, maybe we didn't, but you watch them rise from smaller programs to where they are now to have the chance to win a national championship. Isn't that the true Cinderella? To me, the number of players that were impactful in this process that wouldn't have had in a different college basketball landscape the opportunity to win this national championship. The fact that we're looking at, Janai Broome sitting there and answering questions about, whether or not he should be the player of the year when just a few years ago he's at Morehead State. Like that to me is the Cinderella. So maybe if we want to have a genuine conversation about the future of college basketball and Cinderellas, maybe the real genuine way to do that is to stop complaining about the teams and start acknowledging the individuals that are getting Cinderella moments that are absolutely beautiful. Because this weekend was full of them, and I like that story every bit as much because I got to see the best teams, I got to see the best basketball, and I got to see individual Cinderellas thrive.
I think
That's a
great
good theory.
point, Fitz.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good theory.
It is a great point. I do want to point out, too, that the transfer portal works both ways. That when you have guys that maybe are undersized or under-recruited and they go to some of these mid and low majors, they get pulled back up to the top, so to speak. They get pulled up to the big leagues. Well, some of those guys who were heavily recruited, were the right size, don't fit and don't click at some of these Power 4 programs. So they find their next home at a Belmont, at an Iona, at a Florida Atlantic, at a McNeese, whatever it might be. Obviously, those aren't the stories that are incredibly sexy. Those aren't the stories that we talk about because those aren't the programs that we see contending for a national championship. But I think it's totally fair and totally correct that we can fall in love with some of these individual stories. And although that's not the same as a true Cinderella St. Peter's going to the Elite Eight, it's still a really interesting story nonetheless. And Walter Clayton Jr., too, probably the clear-cut third best player in the country behind Janai Broome and Cooper Flagg, whichever order you want to rank those two. I thought that was pretty cool. I don't want to say revenge, but more so like, look at me now for Walter Clayton Jr. After the race and the discussion all season long was Janai Broome or Cooper Flagg or Janai Broome. Neither of those two were competing for a national championship, and Florida largely won a national championship because of what he was able to do in the Final Four. So I kind of love that, like, I told you so moment for Walter Clayton Jr.